interesting. This is from evidence done by the University of Glasgow by the excellent media unit run by Professor Greg Philo, and they published a number of bad news reports from the Middle East. And that's a particularly shocking statistic. But it's not surprising. It comes out of suffering being graded. You know, some people are victims, are classified as victims, whereas the true victims are classified often as the perpetrators. And for instance, Palestinians are called terrorists, and Israelis are never called terrorists.
Because that suits the politicians in Western
Well,
governments.
it's the way. It's no conspiracy about this at all. It's just that journalists are no different from any of us, from historians and teachers and those of us with some responsibility for public knowledge. We internalise so much of what our experience, what the national experience has been. And I think that is certainly true in this country, where there's always been a struggle between libertarianism, a libertarian view of historiography, and an imperial view. And the imperial view, although only recently have we started to use the word empire and imperial again. Before that it was banished as a sort of word of agitprop. Now it's back, and I think we're understanding, I think the British public are understanding that there is an imperial project, if you like, that it is run from the major imperial power, and it's supported from this former imperial power, and that colours reporting.
And in the chapter of the book, the last taboo, you call this, I think you touched on the last taboo when you made your documentary, Palestine is Still the Issue, 4 years ago.
Yes.
It showed the realities of everyday life for Palestinians, but it had the views of many Palestinians and Israelis. Mm-hmm. But after the film was screened, there was an orchestrated attack on it by Jewish organisations, wasn't there?
Well, there were Zionist organisations because it was supported by many Jewish people. So I think we've got to make that distinction very clear. And some very fanatical groups are very good at organising massive email campaigns. We tracked one down to New York where they would send out a generic email which would give the impression that the person sending it had actually seen the film. And these emails will be sent from places like Texas and South Africa and Australia and so on, but none of these people had seen the film. And they came in various forms. Some of them were quite calm and just were wrong. Others were absolutely vicious. And I got many death threats, and the duty officers at Carlton Television were deluged with this campaign. In the end, it forced the Independent Television Commission to actually inquire into the film. So it was successful up to that point. But my producer and I had to write virtually the equivalent of a thesis on the film, in which we had to justify virtually every frame in the film. I've never had to do this on any other subject. And the ITC not only cleared it, but praised the film and vindicated it. It was a very important decision because it did demonstrate that this kind of technological intimidation, if you like, failed.
Yeah. I mean, how can journalists report the Palestinian-Israeli conflict with perspective? It's a problem that British journalists have with the war in Ireland.
Well, it isn't a Palestinian-Israeli conflict, for one thing. It's the occupation of one people by another. You know, that terrible figure of 9% of people thinking that, you know, I think it's in the same report, that the majority of people thinking that the settlers were Palestinians, that they were people in their own country were actually the settlers. And there's no context to reports. You turn on the news and it's a kind of almost a surreal moving belt, and then up comes the Middle East, the Palestine-Israeli conflict. Oh no, you know, they're at each other again. Well, it's not like that actually. It's the thing that we objected to most strongly when bad tyrants invaded parts of the world that the British government, the American government didn't want invaded and occupied it. Almost virtually the same United Nations resolutions were imposed on Saddam Hussein in 1990, which had been imposed, quote unquote, on Israel on a number of occasions, and the Israelis just rejected them, and of course with American support they could.